Hello and welcome. Welcome from wherever you are in the world, whether it is morning, day, night. Maybe perhaps some of you are a day ahead of me, or I don't know, is anybody a day behind? Pacific time? I don't know if that exists. Um, as I was getting ready, I was thinking I should film like all the funny little movements that I do getting ready, like, oh, gotta fix the top just like this, and then do my hair just like this, um, and there's something about the camera. I think it mirrors, so I'm opposite myself. So it's like I'll try to lift one shoulder and it'll be the other shoulder. Oh, so again, welcome, welcome, welcome. As always, I love it when you say hi so that I can see who's here, who's part of the conversation. I love all your shares, your comments, whether they be questions or shares about how things relate to your life or how you see things that's either in alignment with how I see things or maybe how you see it a little different. I like all of that. Absolutely welcome all of that into the conversation. And I wanted to talk about the importance of, I guess, in one sense, we could just call this emotional awareness. This is one, and I would say emotional awareness is like it's like a big topic. And this is one piece of emotional awareness. And it's truly actually a piece that truly has to do with awareness. I was witnessing both my own kind of thoughts and emotions today, and also have been watching kind of in the larger sphere, people around me have different thoughts and feelings a lot lately. Maybe you've noticed this as well. And what was really coming to me today was a desire to talk about how important it is actually to be aware of what we're feeling. And it sounds kind of basic and kind of cliche, and what I have noticed, both in my own self and with, I mean, honestly, just about every person I've ever worked with over the last 20 years, in some way, shape, or form, at some point at least, even those of us who have quite a bit of emotional awareness, there are these two main tendencies that so many of us have in response to especially intense feeling, intense sensation, intense feeling, intense emotions. And this is true all the time, although it may be somewhat heightened now. A lot of people are having a lot of intense feelings right now, in the midst of a pandemic. It's totally normal. It's to be expected. Nothing's wrong with you. And when we're having a lot of intense emotions, so there's these two main tendencies that I see people have. And one is to justify your feelings or emotions. Oh, I'm feeling, afraid. Like, well, that's because da 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 da. And these are all the statistics that back it up. And because of this, and because I have, and sort of to back it up with some sort of data. And again, that can be all the way onto like the world sphere of like the data about coronavirus or cases or this or that, or it can be even just in our own personal lives. Like, I'm afraid. Oh, and it makes sense that I'm afraid because, this little thing happened, or this person didn't call, or this, but we start to sort of like gather data to justify or defend really internally. It's not even to somebody else who's almost never, it's almost always starts internally, even if ultimately there ends up being somebody who goes like, why are you afraid? And you're like, well, I have all this data to back it up. So that's one response. And the other response is to try to minimize it in some way, to like not to try to go like, oh, I don't have any reason to feel afraid. I'm protected in this way and in that way, and there's no reason for me to feel afraid. And I would assert that actually both of these responses, although they're different on the surface and they have different impact, is that they ultimately come from the same place, and they come from the place that is the part of us that doesn't want to feel whatever that feeling is. So again, I've been using fear as an example. If I don't want to feel like I'm afraid, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. Maybe I have reason to be afraid. Maybe I don't have reason to be afraid. Simple fact is that's actually the feeling in me right now. I'm afraid, or I'm angry about this. Like, and here's all the reasons why I'm justified in being angry, or here's all the reasons why I shouldn't be angry. I have no reason to be angry. They're the same. They're coming from the same part that I would say is an avoidance or a defense against feeling whatever that feeling is. And so this is where this piece came from, is like, it's okay to feel afraid. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel jealous. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel all these things. But when we unconsciously, like when we don't recognize, we don't take the time to go, oh, this is what I'm feeling at a bare minimum, right? Then there's all sorts of practices for feeling, expressing, et cetera, or ways to get more in touch with our feelings, or there's many other pieces around that. And I'm really just talking even a little bit more at the surface level, even just like, oh, I'm afraid. Wow, I'm really angry. Oh, I'm feeling so sad. Is that, again, we'll most often unconsciously avoid the feeling in some way, either by justifying why we have a right to feel it as a way to avoid actually feeling it because it just makes sense. Like, this is how I should be because all the data supports that this is the way I should be, rather than like, this is just how I feel. Or coming up with all the reasons and justifications why I don't need to feel this way, or I shouldn't feel this way, or I should be able to let go of it or get over it. Those are actually both ways of avoiding just feeling it. And then what happens is that we unconsciously mask our fear, our anger, our jealousy, our sadness. We mask it in some way. And then the problem is actually that we then begin to act on, or from might be a better word. We actually act from that emotion because we've either decided that it's true, or we're repressing it. And so it's just subconsciously, we'll start still acting from the emotion, even though all of our attention is going to like, I don't need to feel that way. There's no reason to be afraid. There's no reason to be angry. I have no reason to be jealous, and suppressing it. But in some way, if we're not actually in contact with the actual feeling, sensation, and emotion, it'll find its way. This is just the way this works. Sorry. And start to act from that place, but unconsciously. I don't even necessarily think that it's wrong to act from fear, to act from anger, to act from jealousy, to act from sadness when we do it more consciously. Oh, I'm sad, and therefore I choose da 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 da. I feel afraid, and therefore I choose maybe this or that. And maybe it's to feel safer, or maybe it just has to do with like, well, when I'm afraid, then I need to put these things in place, or this helps me in some way, shape, or form. But it makes it very personal rather than all the things I need to do. So, examples. And again, just because I give an example of something on the surface doesn't necessarily mean that the people who are doing this are unconsciously acting from this place. But these are examples, these are possibilities. Under our current circumstances, for instance, there might be people who are feeling afraid. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We're in the midst of a lot of shelter in place, a lot of quarantine, a lot of people out of work, a lot of people being asked to stay home or wear masks, people knowing people who are getting sick or dying, or, so there's just a lot of elements to this. So a lot of elements to what's going on truly globally right now. And then, there's some people, I saw a meme the other day, and again, this is sort of humorous, but it was something to the effect of, like, I'll call you in 3 hours. I've got to finish disinfecting my groceries. And I don't say this to make light of disinfecting your groceries. Right? Again, that could be like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But it was the funny part was like, right, the exaggeration, like how long it takes to do the groceries and put the groceries in quarantine and disinfect everything. And one could be doing that without realizing like, oh, I'm afraid. And again, this isn't even to dismiss fear. Like, I think fear is a really normal and useful response to a lot of things, like viruses and bears. These are things that it could be quite useful actually to be like, oh, I actually have a healthy fear of that. Or the ocean, right? We have a healthy fear of the ocean. Doesn't mean I don't love the ocean. It just means like, oh, I like respect its capacity to impact me. So, but if someone is afraid and going like, and I have to be afraid because this really is, I have to be afraid about this because of all this, and these are all the cases, and I have to spend all this time disinfecting without really going like, I feel afraid. And I'm really afraid, and this is the choice I'm going to make. That they might sort of avoid actually just feeling fear with all of their protective mechanisms. And all the way on the other side of the spectrum, you could have another person who is equally afraid but who is dismissing their fear. There's no reason to be afraid. There's nothing to fear, and I don't need to fear the virus. I already have the virus. Or actually, that's probably more of like a response, but they actually might feel equally afraid. And then their way of avoiding feeling afraid is to come up with reasons why they don't need to feel afraid. And this, again, could be coming up in terms of like, I'm pretty sure I already had it, which is a way like, now I don't have to feel afraid. Or these are all the conspiracy theories why the virus doesn't actually exist, and so therefore I don't have to feel afraid. And I would say that, again, I don't know, like anybody could be having these responses and not necessarily being unconsciously run by fear, but these are examples of ways it could show up that could look like two people dealing with very different things that could be actually coming from the exact same place, which is right now, for all the reasons going on, I feel afraid. And rather than just feel afraid, I'm going to either justify why it makes sense and all the reasons and start acting from that place, or I'm going to deny that there's any reason to be afraid, and I'm going to start unconsciously acting from that place. Rather than going like, I'm afraid, now how do I choose? Who do I choose to be? How do I choose to act? How do I choose to respond? And we have less control over our, not that we ever really have control, so it's kind of the wrong word, but I'm just going to use it, even if it's not totally appropriate. We just have less control over our actions when our actions are coming from an unconscious feeling rather than a conscious feeling, and then a choice. And I would posit, I'm not going to go into this hugely now. It's one of the things that I actually will go into in a program that I'm releasing in a couple weeks called Beyond Boundaries. But I would say this is actually a boundary issue, because when I'm consciously aware of my experience, my sensations, my emotions, my feelings, then I can choose rather than being unconsciously reactive to something. And that has to do, it's like, I know who I am, I know what I feel, and then I choose how I act and respond and react. And that's a boundary issue. That has absolutely to do with boundary work. It's why I created, actually, is because boundaries, I think, are so much bigger than how they're typically taught. So I've created this program Beyond Boundaries, and I want to talk about actually how things like this are boundary work. So the important thing, this is where this part comes in, it's okay to feel afraid or angry or sad or jealous or whatever those things, but it's essential that we know that we feel them. And so many of us have actually become habitually, like, we have such knee-jerk reactions to either justifying our feelings or denying our feelings, just not wanting to stay with the feeling itself, that we don't even know anymore. And this is the kind of second piece of it, is like why it's important to know what are your tells, right? Your quote unquote tells. You could call them red flags, except it makes it sound like having these feelings is a problem, like it's a red flag. Maybe it's just a little flag. Maybe it's yellow, right? Like a little yellow. What's your little yellow flag that lets you know I feel afraid or I feel angry? So for me right now, actually, this is part of what inspired this, is that I have not felt afraid. However, for 2 days now, I have this pain in my right lower tooth, and I can feel it. And I know that when this happens, what's happening is that I'm clenching my jaw in some way at some point. Even like I'm trying to pay attention and I'm not catching myself clenching, but I know that I am, because when I do that, I put this tooth out slightly in the whole relation to my jaw, such that when I bite down, it feels like it's out of place, and then it starts to hurt. I know that when I'm doing that, I'm feeling stressed or afraid in some way. And so this is helping me to walk it back and go, okay, so like I haven't been feeling afraid. I haven't been feeling stressed. I've actually been feeling, at least consciously pretty good. But most of us have some sort of, and we have these in different ways. So like, for instance, I developed coping mechanisms in my life that actually have me get really still and seemingly calm when I feel stressed. Other people start talking really fast and get loud and move a lot, right? You see the people who like twitch some part of their body or tap their foot, right? And you're like, dude, what are you, like what's in there? Like, I feel fine. I feel fine. You're like, no, you don't. And I just happened to develop a coping mechanism that generally has people around me really think I'm totally fine and doing well, because I get super like calm, I get super still, I get really present, and a lot, and then so I am not stressed every time I do that. I actually also get calm and still and present in a lot of other circumstances, but I also do it under stress. And so it's helpful for me. I have this little tell, right, which is my tooth. I'm having pain in my tooth. I'm like, okay. So it's good for me to go in and keep sort of checking with myself, like, okay, I get that somewhere in there I feel stressed and or afraid. And it's useful to take that into consideration as I move through my life. Other things that come up are, I think about years and years ago, my now ex-husband, he was then my boyfriend at the time, but I remember I used to ask him sometimes, I would say, like he would seem like he was really mad at me. And I would say, like, are you mad at me? And he would completely, like, not lying, not manipulating it, at all consciously. He'd be like, no, I don't feel like, and he would even go inside and he would sort of check for it. He'd be like, I don't feel angry at you at all. Can't find the anger anywhere. And then somewhere along the line, we developed this like little sneaky way around, where what he noticed was that when he was mad at me, he didn't feel soft towards me, like this actual softness that he felt consistently towards me. When he was mad at me, the softness wasn't there. And so then when I would start to feel like he was mad at me or angry or something like that, I could check. I could say, do you feel soft towards me? And then he would be like, oh, I don't. And then we could kind of go looking for the anger, but we couldn't look directly for the anger. So for a lot of people, things like fear, anger, sadness, jealousy, these different kinds of emotions, whether it was as a child or a young adult or in some early pivotal relationship, was made so wrong, and it was dangerous in some way. Again, that might be like actual physical violence or some sort of emotional violence. As a child, really all it takes is love being withdrawn in any way, shape, or form, because our little baby nervous systems know that if love is withdrawn, then we could die. And so if anything happened, again, from like inside the womb in utero, I would say probably all the way to like 5 years old, that caused love to be withdrawn in any consistent way, like then we can mask that. We'll come up with, and we won't be able to find it. I can't find anger for you anywhere, but we can start to look for what are those tells. So again, I have my tooth right now is like one example. That's a very physical one. Some people, might start noticing their shoulders going up by their ears, or they have one spot on their back that's like when there's a big knot there. Even if they think they're doing fine and they're like, I don't feel stressed, I don't feel afraid, I'm dealing with pandemic just fine. They're like, but I have this, baseball sized knot in the middle of my back, which tells me I'm not doing fine. And then we can actually kind of go in and look like, okay, so what else is in there besides what I feel on the surface? Other people can help you find these things too. A lot of times it is the people around us can go like, yeah, you do this thing, like you crunch your jaw, or your eyes get like this, or some part, you start, making this gesture, or you tap your foot. I mean, the people who like twitch and tap their feet, they don't know they're doing it either. It's totally, I know for those of us who don't do those kinds of things, it seems crazy. Like I'll look at people who are tapping their foot like this and I'm just like, how do they even be with themselves? Like it's so agitating. But usually they feel just fine. Um, so I'm trying to think like other people, maybe some of those of you who are watching live, you can share like any of the tells you've either noticed in your loved ones or in yourself over time. But looking for these things, how do we know? And sometimes, like with my ex-husband, we have to kind of go a little circuitous where he couldn't find, he would be looking directly, completely, willing to find anger, but couldn't find it because that was so wrong. It was made so completely wrong in his early childhood that he, it was like put a barrier between himself and his capacity to actually find his own anger. So we had to say, do you feel soft towards me? And then like, whoa, no, the softness that I usually feel towards you is absent. Therefore, I know something else is going on. It's not always like direct correlate. Therefore, I know you're angry, but it's like, we kind of know. So like, let's go looking. Let's get curious here. And in that way, we start to be able to then make some more conscious choices, right? Like, okay, I can't find my anger, but I can't find my softness. So if I was angry at you, this is what it might be about. Like, so is there anything I need to express? How do I actually then start to be able to make conscious choices around my feelings without justifying them, like reifying and making my feelings right, or repressing, denying, and trying to talk myself out of them, right? Both of those are ways to not just feel like I feel this way, regardless of whether I have a good reason to feel this way or whether I should or shouldn't feel this way. I feel this way. And sometimes, our thoughts or data or more information can help us there. But most of the time at that deep emotional, sensory feeling level, it's not about like, I just need some data to prove that I don't need to feel this way. It's actually, giving that part like, oh, you feel this way. It's more important to give that part space. But so often the only way that we know how to give our feelings, our emotions space is to make them right. Rather than just like, I'm allowed to feel angry, even if there's no good reason to feel angry. I can feel jealous, even if I have no reason to mistrust my partner. I can still feel it without acting as though my jealousy is justified, right? Without treating my partner as though they deserve for me to feel jealous of them, but also, again, without repressing, denying, and squashing, like, avoiding, like, well, I shouldn't feel jealous because I can totally trust my partner. There's no reason. Both of those are avoidance of just like, I feel jealous. I hate it when you talk to any other person like, I feel it. I feel it. That's the most essential part. And so again, I bring this, I've seen this for the last 20 years of working with people, but I can see how heightened it is right now because so many people are feeling so many intense emotions. And it's hard. It's hard to just feel what we feel without either repressing, denying, arguing them away, or without justifying them and trying to come up with data to prove why we're allowed to feel that way. And just know that it's actually okay to feel that way. So like this morning, for the first time since we started shelter in place, my partner had to actually leave our property to go to work. He's been able to work from home this whole time, and I have loved it. It's been the best. I love having my partner home. And there have been so many times over the past month, I've been like, I hope he never leaves again. And I know that that's not going to be the way it is, but I love having him here so much. And it's been amazing, actually, just to feel how much I love being with him, how much I love having him around so much. And then also I feel comforted by his presence here. And so yesterday I found out that he was going to need to leave at like 7:30 in the morning. And I already didn't like it. I don't like that. I do not like this change in our, in our dynamic here. But, I know also that's what needs to happen. And then this morning I woke up and had this impulse to ask him to check in with me throughout the day. And then I watched these. This is partly why I actually wanted to bring this today. I watched these two impulses, like, it was like they rose like bubbles in the water in response to this desire I had, because he had said he might need to be gone from 7:30 in the morning until 5:30 at night. And I was like, that's too long. And I was like, the desire basically to say, can you please check in with me every few hours with a little text? And then, and then I had, of course, you should totally be able to ask for that. That's a really long time to be gone. And they have international employees, like basically justifying why it's okay for me to ask for that, why it's okay to feel nervous and tender and vulnerable about him leaving. And then I watched on the other side, like, it's okay. He's totally okay. They're taking lots of precautions. There's no need for him to check in. You don't need to feel afraid. And they rose like at the same time, practically, these two simultaneous ways that I wanted to avoid feeling vulnerable and afraid to have him leave, and the longing for him to check in with me. And rather than just like, oh, it actually doesn't matter if I can justify it or if I shouldn't be able to justify it, or like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's just my desire. And this is how I feel. And this is where the desire is coming from. It's like this very tender, vulnerable feeling. Can I just feel that? And then I can ask for it or not ask for it, or reach out to him, or, like all the choices are actually still available. No one content level choice proves like whether your feeling is right, or you're allowed to feel it, or you felt it, or you're unconscious. Like, all the choices are still available. You can have no fear of the virus and still shelter in place. You can be completely afraid of the virus and still go to the grocery store. You can, all your choices become available once you just like can actually come home to, this is how I feel. Not about like the truth. Like, I feel, anytime you're going to say like, I feel like, the virus isn't real, or I feel like I'm safe, it's actually thoughts. Those are thoughts. But as soon as you come down to, I feel afraid, I feel safe, I feel jealous, I feel angry, and then in some way it actually becomes somewhat irrelevant whether there's data to back up why it's okay to feel that way, or whether it's completely, what we might call irrational, right? Like, I'm angry and there's no reason to be angry. We like to dismiss it by saying it's irrational rather than just like, so you feel angry. Again, part of the reason we want to dismiss it and say it's irrational is like, it doesn't give you license to go, yelling at people or throwing things or treating people as though your anger is justified. But also, there's no reason to go like, I have no reason to feel anger. I shouldn't feel angry. I can't feel. I don't feel angry because there's no reason to feel angry. It's like, if we can actually just really get right with, I feel this, regardless of external data, input, etc. This is what I feel. Then we start to be able to give rise to expression, voice expression, all the ways of actually going into embodied feeling. And we begin to open up all the avenues of choice from that place, regardless of the feeling itself. And again, this is why I say this is a boundary issue, because it's a boundary about like, I'm not making my choices dependent on feeling or not feeling any given way. But I don't have to get over a feeling in order to make certain choices, or I don't have to justify a feeling in order to make other choices. Like, I actually become sovereign and at choice in wherever I choose to then act from, in the midst of, I feel however I am feeling. So the last thing that I'll say is that, and just to give these last few moments again, if there's any comments or shares or questions about this, I'd love to hear from you in these last few minutes. But I think so often when we hear the phrase like, feel your feelings, we think like life has to stop. It's like, I don't fucking have time to feel my feelings, bitch. Like, I got 2 kids, I got a job, I got a dog, I got plants that need watering, I got food that needs cooking, I got a house that needs cleaning, I got clients, believe me, I have all the things. Like, I understand there is no time. I don't know who these people are who are talking about having more time on their hands. Like, there is no time to feel the feelings. First of all, there's always time. And I know that because I have no time. Guaranteed. I'm sure there are people who are busier than I am. And the fact is, like, truly, I have all the good reasons for there to be no time, and I know there's time. So often we just need, just a little bit. And mostly what we're afraid of is that if we give our feelings any voice or any expression, they're going to take over and we're never going to stop feeling. And I can tell you again from 20 years of experience working with thousands and thousands of people, I have never seen that play out. I have never personally had the experience. I've never seen a person who, when they start feeling, like they just never stop feeling, that feeling at that level of intensity. So we can always give ourselves little moments to give full expression or full voice, or even just a moment of awareness to a feeling. Right? I might be in the middle of helping this kid do this homework and helping this kid tie their shoes and cooking dinner and answering the phone. And I'm like, notice like, oh, I'm like afraid or I'm angry or I'm this. And there can be a moment to go in and go like, oh yeah, yeah. Okay. Totally recognize. Okay. I can't actually give you expression right now, but I'm going to come back to you in 30 minutes after I put food on the table. And I promise I'm going to give you some expression then. That actually tells that part of us that we haven't abandoned it. We haven't abandoned ourselves. So that kind of a practice can be helpful, all the way to going like, all right, Kendra, 5 minutes, you got this one song and you're going to give in like body expression, voice expression, sound expression, movement expression fully to whatever this is. How does fear actually move in my body? What shape does it want to take? How does it move? What sounds does the fear make, or the anger or the grief or the sadness? And just, again, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, go for it full out. And then that time is done, a little bow to yourself for that piece of practice. Maybe you haven't felt it all. Maybe there's still a lot left. Great. Like, okay, thank you for that 1 minute. That's all the time I have right now, but I promise I will give you another minute in 3 hours after we do the shit show that is homeschooling or whatever it is that you are needing to meet in your life right now. I don't mean to make light of these things. We're all meeting really, really challenging circumstances, and there's a lot to feel. But this idea that to feel the feelings means life has to stop is a misunderstanding. And oftentimes, even just starting with the willingness to recognize and name and acknowledge, I feel sad. That's where and I don't want to feel sad, therefore I'm trying to do these things to not feel sad. Even just naming these things out loud without even necessarily changing the behavior. I feel sad. I don't want to feel sad. I'm eating ice cream in order to not feel sad. I'm trying to do this thing to not feel sad. I'm trying to pretend like I don't feel sad. I'm telling myself I have no reason to feel sad or angry. I'm trying to talk myself out of feeling angry because I don't like feeling angry. Even if we just say these things out loud and we just acknowledge the truth that's happening in the moment, we come into more right relationship with reality in the realm of our feelings, our emotions, our sensations. And then we can actually we become more intimate with them, and we can begin to make more clear choices in our lives, not unconsciously being hooked by feelings that we are avoiding feeling, either by justifying them, coming up with data and reasons and all the justifications why it's okay to feel that way, why we should, why it's rational, why it makes sense, or repressing and denying and trying to talk ourselves out of them with all the reasons why we don't need to feel that way and we have no reason to feel that way. Without doing either one of those things, just staying nice and close in, but this is the feeling. And then we're in relationship with reality. And and then we can't be hooked unconsciously to act and react from feelings that we haven't even acknowledged that we have. So thank you to those of you who were here live. Beautiful to see a couple of faces. Thanks for saying hi. Those of you who dropped in and just dropped me a little line. If you're just catching the tail end, I hope you go back to the beginning and let me know your thoughts, reflections, any questions you have from anywhere in here. If you're watching the replay, anything that shows up all the way through, any way that this could be some more supportive for your real life, like this is how this shows up in my real life, this is the one that's hard for me. I love all those kinds of things. And there's one last thing I would leave you with. It really is that reminder that however you're feeling is okay. And often it's actually the fear that, or somehow the judgment that, like, but this feeling's not okay, or somebody's going to judge me, or this is unacceptable in some way, that keeps us from being able to acknowledge that we're having the feeling in the first place. So if you can relax that judgment in any way, shape, or form, and just remember that actually what you're feeling is good and right and makes sense. And it doesn't need justification. You don't need to reify it, nor do you need to try to get rid of it, because the feeling itself is okay. Oh, thanks, Michelle. I'm glad you like the sound of my voice. Sending you lots of love.